Mr. President, welcome back. We just had a wide-ranging discussion on very important issues. We spent time talking about our bilateral relations. I would characterize our bilateral relations as strong. We spent time talking about the continent of Africa. And Mr. President, I want to thank you for your leadership. South Africa is a great country. The President has used his position to not only better the lives of his own people, but to work to bring stability and peace to the region and to the continent. We talked about several situations that are of concern to our government, most notably Darfur. I want to thank you for your leadership there. The President's got troops there. Deputy Secretary Zellick is on the way to Darfur. This is a serious situation, as you know. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell, with my concurrence, declared the situation a genocide. Our government has put a lot of money to help deal with the human suffering there. Later on today, I'll be meeting with the head of NATO, who has agreed to help the AU
and Nigeria, the U.S. Military forces sent the planes that actually did the airlift of those forces to Darfur. That's the kind of support that we've asked for. And indeed, as the President has indicated, we even went to NATO. We've also agreed to support. So I don't think it's, certainly from the African perspective, we wouldn't say we want deployment of U.S. troops in Darfur. We don't. On the continent, we've got the people to do this, military, police, other, so long as we get this necessary logistical support. I think that's what's critically important.
You want to call on somebody from your press corps?
Anybody, Miranda?
With about 4 weeks left for the G8 summit, do you still have any reservations about the Prime Minister's Tony Blair's Commission for Africa report, especially with reference to the international finance facility?
We have made our position pretty clear on that it doesn't fit our budgetary process. On the other hand, I've also made it clear to the Prime Minister I look forward to working with Great Britain and other countries to advance the African agenda that has been on the G8's agenda for ever since I've been the President. And the President and I were talking about the positive steps that have been taken. The NEPAD agreement was presented as a result of G8 meetings, commitment to trade, and as well as humanitarian help. All emerged as a result of the conversations through the G8 and commitments as a result of the G8. And I hope to advance the agenda, what I call the compassion agenda. And by the way, the thing I appreciate about the President is he understands it's a two-way street we're talking about. I mean, countries such as ours are not going to want to give aid to countries that are corrupt or don't hold true to democratic principles, such as rule of law and transparency and human rights and human decency. And that's where the President has played such a vital role, because South Africa has been a stalwart when it comes to democratic institutions. But no, we've got more work to do. I'm looking forward to sitting down not only at the table with the leaders from the G8 countries, but as well as leaders from the continent of Africa, and other countries are coming. So it's going to be quite a meeting. Kyle.
Mr. President, looking back over the last year, you talked an awful lot about the importance of free and fair elections in Iraq, which most international observers now believe is what took place. Given the lesson that you say that leaves for the region, do you think that Egypt is now on the case for the same free and fair elections? And if not, what would they need to do?
Interesting question. I spoke to President Mubarak today, and he talked to me, by the way, about him calling his Attorney General calling upon his Attorney General to investigate the disturbance around one of the polling sites. And I urged him once again to have as free and fair election as possible, because it'll be a great legacy for his country. He's publicly stated he's for free and fair elections, and now's the time for him to show the world that his great country can set an example for others. He assured me that that's just exactly what he wants to do, and I will, best of my ability, continue to try to convince him that it's in not only Egypt's interest, but the world's interest to see that Egypt have free and fair elections. Listen, the definition of free and fair, there's international standards, of course, but people ought to be allowed to vote without being intimidated. People ought to be allowed to be on TV, and if the government owns the TV, they need to allow the opposition on TV. People ought to be allowed to, carry signs and express their displeasure or pleasure. People ought to have every vote count, and it seem like reasonable standards.
Dumsan.
My colleague will ask the question.
Oh,
Okay, it's a relay.
It's a relay.
Mr. President, does your administration still regard Zimbabwe as an outpost of tyranny? And President Mbeki, do you still regard that as an unhelpful characterization?
I brought up Zimbabwe. It's obviously we're concerned about a leadership that does not adhere to democratic principles, and obviously concerned about a country that was able to, for example, feed herself, now has to import food as an example of the consequence of not adhering to democratic principles. The President who's been very much involved in this issue, gave me a briefing on, for example, different ways that the people are trying to reconcile their differences of opinion within Zimbabwe, but it's a problem, yeah.
Yes, you see, the critical challenge, as I'm sure you are aware, is to assist the people of Zimbabwe to overcome their political problems, their economic problems. There's problems even now of food shortages because of the drought. And so what is really critically important is to see in what ways we can support the opposition party, the ruling party in Zimbabwe to overcome these problems. And clearly one of the critically important things to do is to make sure that you have the political arrangements that address matters of rule of law, matters that address issues of the freedom of the press, issues that address questions of freedom of assembly, the whole range of matters which require that the Zimbabweans have a look at the constitution, look at the legislation, and this is the direction in which we're trying to encourage them to move, so that they create this political basis where everybody is comfortable that we've got a stable democratic system in the country, which is critically fundamental to addressing these other major challenges of ensuring the recovery of the economy of Zimbabwe and really improving the lives of the people. So that's the direction we're taking.
Well, thank you all for coming. I owe the President a